Hello, everyone. Sam here, and we need to get ready for Secret Agent X versus Dr. Death. Notice how I said we need to get ready instead of we need to talk about, like how I normally open these videos. That's because this video is not going to be a review of this story. This is going to be what I call a primer video. Uh, because a lot of the pulp characters I talk about in some of these reviews coming up, they are not necessarily well known by a lot of people. If you're into pulp fiction and all the old pulp characters, you probably are, but I find that a lot of people actually don't really know much about some of these pulp characters, because some of these pulp characters were ones that only appeared for a few years, all the way back in like the 30s. Some of them only appeared for a few months. They the podcast I run, the Suitors of the Domino Lady podcast, it focuses on a character who was only in pulp magazines for 6 months, for 6 issues in 1936. So a lot of pulp characters are not really well known by a lot of people. So primer videos are going to be me talking about the characters used in a story, basically as a way of helping you guys understand who these characters are, what their histories are, and just sort of helping you pick the stories you need to read before you read stories like this that are like team ups, simply because it's probably better you know these characters going in. Uh, I mean, maybe someone will read this without knowing who these characters are, but I figure most people would probably want to know who Secret Agent X and Dr. Death are. So, this is going to be a video very much focusing on them and giving reading recommendations, uh, as well as my own reading plans for these characters. So, as you can probably see by the byline, this story is by Will Murray. And Will Murray is a very famous pulp historian as well as pulp writer. He's actually written for a lot of characters from the classic pulp era, like Doc Savage. Uh, he's done a handful of Shadow stories. I believe he also did. He's on the tip of my. The Spider. He did a couple of Spider stories. But he also has a bit of a name in comics. He wrote for some comics. His biggest claim to fame is he was the co-creator of the Marvel Comics character Squirrel Girl. He created Squirrel Girl with Steve Ditko. Steve Ditko famously being the co-creator of Spider-Man. So he's got a lot of great pedigree in pulp and comics. And this story was released very recently. I got this one, I think, a few weeks ago. And this story focuses on pairing up the pulp hero, Secret Agent X, and the pulp villain, Dr. Death. And the whole idea of this is that Dr. Death is such a huge villain that X kind of finds himself overwhelmed, and he has to go and recruit several other pulp heroes to help him fight Dr. Death. So it's a very ambitious novel in that respect, and definitely very interesting. Murray has kind of done he did something similar with the Shadow and Doc Savage. He had a Doc Savage story where the Shadow and Doc Savage kind of came into conflict. Actually, he did two of them, now I remember. But he's done these crossovers before, but this one's kind of interesting because Secret Agent X and Dr. Death were not really associated with one another. They were from different pulp publishers. That wasn't the case with the Shadow and Doc Savage. They were both from Street and Smith. So this is a very interesting and ambitious crossover. And Will Murray has been hyping it up for a couple months now. When I was at last year's Pulp Fest, he talked about it at some of the panels. And he actually was featured in the Pulpster magazine of that year. Because last year, this is the copy, they did Masters of Villainy. And Dr. Death was one of the pulp villains that was discussed. And yeah, Will Murray has an article in here called The Resurrection of Dr. Death, and he's talking about his thought process for making this novel. So I've known about this for a while, so I was really curious about how the story was going to turn out. Unfortunately, due to a little bit of procrastination and a lot of work, I actually have not read very many Secret Agent X or Dr. Death stories. And one of my pet peeves about stories like this with established pulp characters is that I really don't like reading new stories featuring those pulp characters until I've read the original stories, because I just really don't like the idea of jumping in to a character, seeing these new stories by him that maybe portray him one way, but then going back to the older stories, seeing, oh, they actually kind of portrayed him this way, and just sort of going, oh, well, that wasn't really what I was expecting. And, it creates kind of this weird dissonance in my mind. And I go, I kind of prefer to have a good idea of what the character is like as they were originally written before going into newer stories. That's why it takes me so long to do some reviews, because there's a lot of stories that are influenced by other stories, and sometimes ones that are not even connected. Like Dr. Death, I'll be talking about here in a minute. He was influenced by this other character who's not associated with, I believe it was Dell Magazines. That was who published Dr. Death. And I really want to read those stories first. So I just have this weird thing that I really want to see a character's original stories and whoever influenced them first before going to new stories, just because I really want to be in the right mindset for those characters. Just a second. But who are the characters actually featured in this story? I'm going to talk about 3 of them. There are more. I know for a fact there's more, but I'm only going to talk about 3 because they're the ones that I'm aware of. And the first one we got to talk about is the main hero of it, Secret Agent X. This is the Altus collection of the first couple of Secret Agent X stories. They've done a bunch of collections of Secret Agent X. And this was, I bought this, I think, about a year ago or so. Again, a little bit procrastinatory. But Secret Agent X is a character that was made by a pulp publisher called Ace Magazines. And they had a bunch of publications and sort of these small heroes that, well, I say small, pulp heroes who were very, I'm not sure, they weren't as prolific as like the Shadow or the Spider, but they had their pretty healthy following. And Secret Agent X was one of their bigger ones, as he actually had his own magazine for several years. And the whole thing about Secret Agent X was that he was a master of disguise. He could turn himself into anybody. And he used his disguise ability to fight criminals. And he was generally working as an agent of the government. I've heard some people say that he was sometimes working for like a secret cabal of like millionaires. But most versions I see have him as a government agent. And the whole deal with him is that the small town and local police kind of see him as a villain, a criminal, but the federal government knows what he's doing and kind of keeps tabs on him, and he reports back to them. And only two people really know what's going on with him. One was a news reporter named Betty Dale, he was sometimes portrayed as his girlfriend. I've heard some say that she wasn't at first, but Betty is aware of what he's doing. And his government handler by the name of K9, that's his designation. And his K9 is aware of what he's doing, too. And his big gimmick was that he had a gas gun, that if he shot you with it, it would knock you out. You know, very Green Hornet-esque. And his stories ran from February 1934 to March 1939. And like I said, he had his own magazine. So he was kind of a big character there at Ace. This collection collects the first 4 stories, titled The Torture Trust, The Spectral Strangler, The Death Torch Terror, and Ambassador of Doom. I've read the intro to this, but I haven't really started the stories yet. But I'm going to read this one first, just to get a good idea of what Secret Agent X was like. And if I like it, I'll read more of the volumes, but I want to finish this one first before I get into Secret Agent X versus Dr. Death. And I highly recommend you do too, because you should probably know about him too before you go into this novel. So check this one out. The next character is the aforementioned villain of the piece, Dr. Death. And Dr. Death, like I said, Pulpfest had a lot of programming around villains, and there was a lot of talk about Dr. Death. And Dr. Death was kind of an interesting experiment, because he was the first true attempt to give make the villain the main focus of the pulp, rather than doing a hero pulp. Because by this point, in 1935, there were plenty of hero pulps. The Shadow, Doc Savage, The Spider, Secret Agent X, like we just said. But there wasn't really a villain pulp. You know, there wasn't a pulp where the villain was kind of the main draw. So in 1935, Dell Magazines decided they were going to try a little experiment. And they released in February 1935 the very first Dr. Death issue. And it featured a story called 12 Must Die. And the whole thing about Dr. Death was that he was a former professor from Yale. His name was Rance Mandarin. And he was initially this well-respected professor at Yale. I believe it was of psychology. But one day he just went crazy. And now he's planning to destroy a lot of the life on Earth with this kind of like eco-terrorist mindset, because he sees mankind as this plague on the world, and he decides to become the embodiment of death and become Dr. Death in order to destroy a good portion of mankind so that the Earth will heal. again, kind of an interesting thing of kind of a brand of eco-terrorism. A lot of the presenters at the Pulp Fest and as well in the Pulpster kind of said, yeah, he was actually kind of an eco-terrorist, which wasn't as well heard of in the 1930s, but obviously became much more well known in the 70s and 80s with terrorist groups like the ELF. So he's somewhat of a trailblazer in that respect. But Dr. Death was interesting because he used science. Obviously, he was a scientist to cause havoc, but he also would use stuff like magic and like necromancy to make zombies and a lot of other strange, fantastical abilities. So he was a very much a jack of all trades villain, and he was just this weird, bizarre figure. And he was opposed by a hero because if you've read any villain stories, you know that while the villain might be the main character, there's always a good guy in their way. And the good guy in this case was Jimmy Holmes, who was a police detective that was always racing to stop Dr. Death. And I've actually been reading the Dr. Fu Manchu stories, and it's very analogous to those Fu Manchu stories. Because you have the police officer, what's his name, Nayland Smith, always opposing Fu Manchu. And Fu Manchu is much smarter than Smith, but Smith's persistence kind of keeps Fu Manchu on his toes. And actually, that was kind of why I was reading Fu Manchu to begin with, prepare for Dr. Death, because Will Murray and others had told me that they're very much in the spirit of the Fu Manchu story. So I really wanted to be familiar with Fu Manchu before getting into Dr. Death. Now, from the way I was hyping it up, you might think, oh, well, Dr. Death was a big deal. He must have gotten a lot of issues. Nope. He only got 3 issues. February, March, April of 1935. And apparently the experiment didn't work because Dell stopped it after those 3 issues. Though the author, Harold Ward, actually had written 2 other Dr. Death stories, but those weren't released until decades later. So, the first 3 that were ever published are in this one, Volume 1, and they are 12 Must Die, The Gray Creatures, and The Shriveling Murders. These were the ones that were officially published. But I also have the second edition that includes the 2 stories that Harold Ward wrote, but were never actually published. And they are, let me see, Waves of Madness and The Red Mist of Death. So, this is a weird thing that normally I would only check out this first collection, but I kind of want to check out the second one just because even though they weren't published until years later, they were kind of meant to congeal with these first 3. So if you're interested in Dr. Death, I would say you probably want to get both of these and check them both out just because they are meant to be part of the same series. So that'll be very interesting to read these and see how Will Murray writes Dr. Death in his version. Just a moment. The last character I'm going to talk about is Moon Man, because this character, this is the only other character I'm aware of who is in Secret Agent X versus Dr. Death. The reason I'm aware of is he's on the front cover. It's hard to see on the camera, but this guy right here, you see this bull-headed guy, that's the Moon Man. And I immediately recognized him because he's pretty recognizable. Also because I've read a lot of Spider-Man, and he looks pretty much like the villain Mysterio. So he's pretty recognizable. And Moon Man was from the same company as Secret Agent X, Ace Magazines. And Moon Man did not have his own magazine, but he was in a crime magazine called 10 Detective Aces. And he popped up a lot in them. He popped up in 39 issues of 10 Detective Aces from 1933 to 1937. This one here is the volume 1, collecting his stories from, I believe it's all the ones from 1933. I know they sometimes split them up a bit, but I believe these are all the ones. Yeah, these are all the ones from 1933. And his whole deal was that, of course, he wore this fishbowl helmet that he could see out of, but people couldn't see in. That was kind of the way he disguised himself. He could also use it to breathe in environments that he shouldn't have been able to breathe. And Moon Man's big thing was that he was kind of this Robin Hood type guy, where he stole from the corrupt to give to the poor. And this was, of course, this is 1933. It's right in the middle of the Great Depression. So a lot of people are more than happy to take his help during this tough time in history. But because he's stealing, he's wanted by the police. And he doesn't have anyone to back him up. He's on his own. And to make things worse, his true identity is Stephen Thatcher, who is a detective on the police force that is trying to hunt him down. And not only is he the son of the police chief, but his fellow policeman, Gil McEwen, is the one really focused on taking the Moon Man down, all while not knowing his compatriot Stephen is the Moon Man. So it's kind of that thing of the hero being hunted by his own friends, and that's a really interesting concept to me. So I'm actually really eager to read this collection, because this is just kind of a neat concept. And again, I would recommend, if you want to check out the Moon Man, get the first volume just so you're at least familiar with him going into Secret Agent X versus Dr. Death. That's going to be quite handy. Now, that's the last character I'll talk about, but there are actually a lot of other characters in here. Will Murray mentioned at Pulpster that there were going to be quite a few pulp characters featured in this story, because Secret Agent X rounds up a lot of different pulp characters to help him fight Dr. Death. And because of that, and because I didn't want to read this until I read these aforementioned characters, I don't really know who those characters are. But Will Murray does give a hint to who they are if you're curious enough to look on the dedication page, because he dedicates the book to all of the writers who have written these original heroes. So, and he gives 7 names. 3 of them I can rule out because they're the creators of Secret Agent X, Dr. Death, and Moon Man. So those other 4, if I investigate who they wrote, there's a good chance I could figure out who was going to pop up in this story. So I may do that, but I'm going to let it be a surprise, because I really like expand my horizons, and I just kind of want to see, well, who's gonna pop up here, just out of curiosity. So that'll be a lot of fun, trying to figure out, well, who else is gonna pop up here. As I mentioned earlier, I'm probably not going to get to this story for a few months, partially because I want to do the Secret Agent X, Moon Man, and Dr. Death stories. But before I do the Dr. Death stories, I wanted to finish reading all of the Fu Manchu stories that came out before 1935. Because, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of folks pointed out to me at Pulp Fest that Fu Manchu really influenced a lot of the villain pulps. Because I mentioned Dr. Death, but there was a one done by Weird Tales called Dr. Satan. And he apparently was very influenced by Fu Manchu. And apparently all the villain pulps kind of had the same setup as Fu Manchu, where the villain was doing one thing, and this like heroic hero comes in to stop the villains. So I just kind of decided, okay, I need to read Fu Manchu before I really get into these villains from the pulps. So I'm currently in the middle of the second Fu Manchu book. The first one I finished. There'll be a review for that probably up sometime next week. But I got to finish the Fu Manchus before 1935. And last I checked, there was like 6 or 7 Fu Manchu stories. So this will be a while, but I think I'll enjoy reading it. I've enjoyed the Fu Manchu stories so far. I like the first one. Second one's a little hit or miss, but still enjoyable. I actually got you can't see it, but behind me I got the one of the omnibuses for Fu Manchu. I bought all 5 volumes of that omnibus that was done about 20 years ago. I think volume 5 just came in today. The rest of the volumes will be coming. So I will be finishing those Fu Manchu stories soon, and once those are the ones before 1935 are done, then I'll be getting to Dr. Death. And when I'm done with Dr. Death, I can finally get to this story. So apologies if anyone was like really hoping I would read this right off, but I really wanted to be familiar with these characters before jumping in. So, and if you want to be familiar with these characters before you read this story, check out all the editions that I just showed you of Secret Agent X, Dr. Death, and Moon Man, because these are all available on Steeger Books. I'll leave a link in the description. But you can get all of these at Steeger Books, so go there if you really want to get those. I'm also going to leave a link in the description for my podcast regarding the Domino Lady, because she's also a lesser-known pulp character. So check that out. Check both of those out if you're interested. And I hope to see you in a few months when I finally do my review of Secret Agent X versus Dr. Death. So have some patience. Get to reading if you want to be familiar with these characters. And I will see you all in a couple months to talk about Secret Agent X versus Dr. Death. All right. Bye.